Yeah, so I do know this is an unpopular opinion that I'm about to have.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the Twitter comments and whatnot. Look, I understand. I'm also, I'm from Chicago, not quite a Philadelphia-esque fan base, but also, a passionate fan base. There's a lot of fire blank GM's name going on around here as well. But yeah, I understand that there's no debate that the scouting aspect and the talent evaluation aspect has fallen short in a couple drafts, but. Yeah, and do they need help there? And do they need to add more people there because that's not his scene? I would argue yes. I think they have done that a little bit. But from a value perspective, he is, it's kind of not even a debate. He is one of the better GMs in that realm. He comes from kind of my background. He was football administration, so more contracts and salary cap, and I think kind of trade values and stuff kind of falls under that umbrella as well. I think he's done very well there, and I think the data supports that. But at the end of the day, you have to hit on these draft picks, and that's the big thing. So I think, those two things go hand in hand, where he's given them a lot of opportunities, a lot of chances to kind of do great. But unfortunately, the scouting department, which obviously he is a part of, has fallen short, and I understand that.
I've never heard it before.
Yeah.
Look, you and me both, brother.
Never heard it before. Never.
You and me both at that point. Jeez.
The Middle with Eitan Shander, Barrett Brooks, and Harry Mays. Weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome to the Wildwoods, the perfect place where you can safely do everything or nothing at all. Catch a wave, take a nap, go for a drive, grab a bite. It's your vacation, and we're doing everything we can to make it a safe one. The Wildwoods. Your vacation, your way.
Connecticut School of Broadcasting is now the CSB Media Arts Center, training in all that is media, including the nation's most successful broadcast training program with professional media experts whose entire mission is to get you career ready in just 8 or 16 weeks. Train on-site and online at our local campus in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. VA approved. CSB Media Arts Center. Visit gocsb.com.
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. Doc and Krause every Saturday night from 6 till 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at ibew98.org.
Jody Mack, the legendary sports talker, joins forces with NFL insider John McMullen. Start your morning with Johnny Mack and Jody Mack across the JAKIB Media Network.
You got a Wednesday hump day edition of Birds 365 with the Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. We're getting dangerously close to the draft. Not really. It's still 8 days away, but it seems like it's been coming every day for the past 3 weeks. We've still got a little bit more to wait, but it doesn't mean we can't analyze it. We've got a helping hand for that coming up over the next 10, 15 minutes as he joins us. Brad Spielberger from used to be Over the Cap, now Pro Football Focus contributor and analyst in the NFL, hops aboard with us on Birds 365. How are you this morning, Brad?
Doing great. How about you guys?
Doing well, Brad. Thrilled to have you. I think this is such an interesting offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles, especially. And while I have you, I want to talk about your GM story that you originally put on Over the Cap. You kind of updated yesterday on Twitter. But before I get to that, the first thing you have to talk about with the Eagles when it comes to the salary cap is Carson Wentz and $33.8 million in dead money. Can you kind of tell the listeners how historic, what a precedent that is? I mean, it's never been done before in the league, and it's being done now in the pandemic year, we have to scale back in the salary cap for essentially the first time.
Yeah, it really is unprecedented to an extreme degree with Wentz. I mean, Jared Goff actually set the record at his trade at $22.2 million. And then Wentz almost adds 10 million onto, or does add, over 10 million to 33.8 million in dead money. It's I think going to last as the largest, total dead money amount for a long time. And even if the amount gets passed, as you mentioned, because the cap is 182.5 million, 33.8 out of 182.5. I can't do the quick math right now, but about a sixth, let's say.
Sure.
I think that will never be surpassed, probably for the history of the NFL. That'll never be topped.
Whoa.
Oh, well, but you might have said that about Jared Goff, and then it was about 10 days later, the Eagles rewrote the record book. I understand what you're trying to say, but let me just get you on the record, because I know how I feel. I think it was justified. They admitted a mistake, massive mistake, record-setting mistake, but it's better to admit it and move on than it is to keep them. I know a lot of people, our buddy Andrew Brandt, whose opinion I respect like almost no others, said it'll never happen because the Eagles won't do that, won't take that black eye. Yeah, they did, and I think they needed to take that black eye. So even though it is eye-popping and attention-getting, I personally think they did the right thing. How about you?
I agree with you there. Yeah. So I actually don't think dead money should be a constraint all the time. Like you said, it was clearly needed to be done. The relationship had soured, all those things, but also just if you're going to do it, rip the Band-Aid off, go ahead and get it done. So I agree with you. It's historic from the, just kind of the numbers perspective, but should they have let it basically stop them from making the move? No, I agree with you. They should not have.
Brad, one of sort of the fallouts of all that dead money for the Eagles, but this is sort of a league-wide type of thing because of the scale back in the salary cap, is really those voidable years at the end of contracts, which has always been a thing. But it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have more of these one-year deals with 4 voidable years on the end to spread out any kind of signing bonus, roster bonus. When the cap does go back up, and obviously that should start next year, but it's not going to go up as much as people expect because the TV money doesn't kick in yet and all that. But will that have a lasting effect on NFL teams that go that route a little bit too much, all those voidable years?
So I do like speaking with Eagles folks and Saints folks as well, because you guys have been doing this forever. But but obviously a lot of teams are dipping their toes in this water for the first time. But no, so I think the entire approach for the Eagles coming into this offseason and the Saints and other teams as well is that if the cap always rose as they obviously all expected it to, then you can kind of get through it. It's not an ideal approach. It will create dead money at some point. But if the cap was 210 million, instead of the 182.5 that we have now, they would have still had to make some moves. But I honestly also think that Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Malik, like those guys were going to get moved on regardless. It wasn't just because of the cap. So I do think the impact we'll see is that in 2022, but more so 2023 is when a lot of them end as well. There are a lot of the 1-year versions, like you said, but there's also a lot that are 2 years and then a bunch of void years. Teams will just take on, a little bit of dead money. But at that point, again, as you said, with the TV money kicking in, probably some sports gambling money kicking in, all those things, the cap should jump in 2 years from now. The cap should jump, a good chunk. And I think teams will just have some dead money, but they'll be able to work around it.
I've got one more cap question for you. And yes, a whole bunch of fans don't care which one about the guy. Just tell me whether the guy can play or not. But you can't do that in the world in which we live in the NFL because the cap is a very big, important part of it. And your guys' website, Over the Cap, gives great information and lets geeks and wonks like us who follow every aspect of the league to be completely informed. Where are your best sources? It's got to be one of 3. Either you get money on new contracts from the teams, the players, aka their agents, and or the league itself. Where do you guys get your original information from when you double check it and make sure that the monies that you're saying are out there are accurate? How do you do that? How do you usually come about getting new information when players' contracts are signed?
Well, I guess I shouldn't, reveal our sources, but I can tell you definitively that the league is not giving us any information. And
Ever.
and teams themselves are also not giving us information. So I think you can do process of elimination after that.
Fair enough.
Brad, I want to shift to what you did at Over the Cap and now kind of updated it. And by the way, you can read now about Brad at Pro Football Focus. Now he breaks down the cap issues really well there. But you took a look at the history of the GMs, and I think it's a prudent time for us in Philadelphia, because Howie Roseman is going to do his pre-draft availability later this morning with Andy Weidel, Nick Sirianni. But you looked at his history, and you looked at all the GM's history, and there seems to be kind of 4 categories. And the go-get-em guy, which is Mickey Loomis, with the Saints, he just goes up and gets his guy. The stand pat guys, and that's sort of the Mike Brown types. Then you have the assembled draft capital guys, Rick Spielman, Bill Belichick types, John Schneider maybe in Seattle. And then you got the guys that go up and go down and go up and go down. And that's kind of where Howie Roseman is. And is that, in a lot of ways, from your research, the most unpredictable GM?
Yeah, I think it is. I think I do want to follow up and kind of also discuss, when they're making the moves. So, because obviously, trading up later in the draft, I think is more. I don't know. We obviously think that trading up is generally a bad practice, just from a value standpoint. But if you're doing it late in the later rounds, it's obviously not as bad as if you're making a big trade up in the first or something like that. Also, quarterbacks excluded. I'm not discussing the Wentz trade. I actually think that trading into the top 5 or top 10 for a quarterback is kind of a different story. Just because of how important that position is. But, for example, like an Andre Dillard trade, like he looked like a great prospect, but that's every year we have that, and sometimes things don't work out. So he is very unpredictable. They move up and down, but I think they actually do a very good job in the way they navigate the draft. I think they add more value than they give up. And I think they also, by trading down, it enables them to move up because they kind of have some excess capital that they've accumulated. So they are one of the bigger wheeler and dealers, but recently they've been doing more moving down, obviously with the big trade this year. And I think they're smart in that they approach it kind of how they should approach it based on where their roster's at. So they were more aggressive. For an example, like with an Andre Dillard trade, they said, okay, we have a window where, we just, competed in a Super Bowl. Jason Peters is somehow still playing at 55 years old, but we need a left tackle. So it made sense then. Now I think they say, look, we're kind of peeling it back a little bit. We're probably not going to be great this year. Let's add a future first-round pick from the Dolphins, in this trade they made down to 12. So I think they're actually very calculated and very smart in how they go about it.
Brad, I'm going to ask you about general feel around the league in one specific aspect. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it just came onto the scene, the NFL draft value chart, which was created, and within a year or two, became almost the Bible of NFL draft day trades, that you had to come out on the right end of the value chart for you to be able to do a deal. Over time, some teams decided that they didn't like it or didn't think it fit the way that they looked at things or was accurate enough or that the values were off. They created their own chart. There have been other ones out there. I've seen a handful over the years. But the original one that first came out is still the one that is talked about the most. Is it still used in league circles? Do teams still have that handy to make sure if they're talking a deal on draft day, they're getting enough value in return, or has it become a thing of the past?
So it is still used, and I can tell you that based both on teams telling me that, but also basically I ran an analysis. So we actually had Over the Cap, me and Jason Fitzgerald wrote a book and created our own draft value chart. It's not really trying to predict trades. It's not a good resource for trades, but it's more about how the teams actually value these picks or what you should expect from a production standpoint. But yeah, so anyways, through that analysis and that research, we basically ran through every single trade and said, okay, like, is this a zero-sum trade based on the Jimmy Johnson, that original chart? And that chart is still controlling the marketplace. There have been some tweaks and adjustments. There's a chart called the Rich Hill chart, which was created the same way as Jimmy Johnson, where you just retroactively look at trades. But They're very similar, and it does still appear that yes, if you are trying to make a trade with another team, on average from 2011 to now, the rookie wage scale is kind of our focus. The two trade packages are within about 9% of value, right? So kind of, if one team gives picks XYZ, another ABC, those packages are still going to be pretty close in value with a small surplus. For the team moving up, generally gives up a small surplus, stuff like that. So yes, that chart, I know for some reason teams try to push back on that and say they're all looking at these different things. And I believe them that they're looking at other things. But at the end of the day, when they make that phone call and say, hey, we're trying to move or, up or down, the other team says, okay, let us go check the Johnson chart. If it's close to zero sum there, then we got a deal.
It's interesting. You mentioned the quarterbacks. They kind of skew everything. And I think if you look, maybe the best example would be the Patrick Mahomes trade, because there's a lot of revisionist history, but people were looking at the Chiefs at the time and saying, wow, you're doing a lot for a prospect that people had concerns over from a mechanical standpoint. They don't want to admit that now because he's turned into such a superstar, but that was the theory at the time. But at that particular position, how does that skew value when you're looking at trade charts? Because it means so much. I mean, if you hit at the quarterback position, everything's valuable, no matter where you do it, no matter how much you give up for it.
100%. Yeah, I think you touched on a couple good things there. Is that yes, everyone loves to do revisionist history, and the example we always get is Julio Jones. Say, oh, this is a phenomenal trade up to number 6 to get Julio Jones. Well, the next year the Jaguars traded to 5 and got Justin Blackmon. The year after that, the Bills traded to 4 and got Sammy Watkins. And the year after that, the Rams traded to 8 and got Tavon Austin. So for every good example you can give me, I can spout off 5 bad ones. But the Chiefs, it was an expensive trade. It was a third and a future first, and of course 27 to get to 10 for a guy that at the time we didn't know would become a phenom. But I think the thing there is, like you said, with the quarterbacks, it's interesting in the analysis. You can tell that the trade down team tends to know that the team coming up is coming up for a quarterback because those trades are always more expensive. Yeah. So it's even they know, like, look, we know that you have, the potential, excess value you could be getting from this trade is, nuclear. So we're going to make you pay, a bit of a premium because it's for a quarterback, which I think is pretty interesting.
Here's the reason why I think both of you guys are right on. And it kind of annoys me looking at it from an Eagle perspective. What the Dolphins were able to get dropping from 3 back to 12 so far outweighs what the Eagles were able to get dropping from 6 back to 12. It's only a 3-slot difference, but it's an extra first-round draft pick and a locked-in pick rather than just moving up around, which the Eagles got. Why the big difference? Oh, because you're talking about the quarterbacks. Because the 49ers got into a place where they could take a quarterback at 6 if you believe there are 5 quarterbacks. All 5 of them could be gone in the first 5 picks. You don't have that quarterback effect. It bothers me that the Eagles had to settle for that much less to drop back. But I understand it because, damn, if this top of the draft isn't quarterback driven.
100%. And right. So the 49ers at number 3 are guaranteed to get a quarterback. And I think we're seeing now that even if a quarterback does make it to number 6, where the Eagles were and the Dolphins now are, it's going to be probably the 4th, if not the 5th, quarterback available, and a guy that teams are less excited about. But I'll tell you, running the numbers on that Eagles trade already, it's actually similar in value, almost identical per the Johnson chart, to when the Steelers traded up from 20 all the way to 10 for linebacker Devin Bush back in 2019. So, they moved 6 spots. Obviously, 6 is a lot higher than 10. But they, the Eagles moved down 6 spots and basically got the same value as the Broncos did, moving from 10 down to 20. So it actually was a pretty solid trade for Philly. But I hear you. The 49ers gave Miami a ransom, and Philly just got a decent package.
Brad, is that what you find? I want to circle back to Howie Roseman. When you look at his history, because right now, I don't know if you know, but, people here, they go to Phillies games, they say, fire Howie, they start chants, the Eagles publish something on their website, the first 10 comments on Twitter is fire Howie. He's not very popular right now. But the thought around the league is the guy knows value. The guy gets value when it comes to trades. The bigger issue is the back end. Does he pick the right player when it comes down to the end game? But as far as value, in his long history now, it's pretty long with trades moving up and down the draft board. How would you rate him?
Yeah, so I do know this is an unpopular opinion that I'm about to have.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the Twitter comments and whatnot. Look, I understand. I'm also, I'm from Chicago, not quite a Philadelphia-esque fan base, but also, a passionate fan base. There's a lot of fire blank GM's name going on around here as well. But yeah, I understand that there's no debate that the scouting aspect and the talent evaluation aspect has fallen short in a couple drafts. But and do they need help there? And do they need to add more people there because that's not his scene? I would argue yes. I think they have done that a little bit. But from a value perspective, he is, it's kind of not even a debate. He is one of the better GMs in that realm. He comes from kind of my background. He was football administration, so more contracts and salary cap, and I think kind of trade values and stuff kind of falls under that umbrella as well. I think he's done very well there, and I think the data supports that. But at the end of the day, you have to hit on these draft picks, and that's the big thing. So I think, those two things go hand in hand, where he's given them a lot of opportunities, a lot of chances to kind of do great. But unfortunately, the scouting department, which obviously he is a part of, has fallen short, and I understand that.
If you want to check out the stuff that Brad posted yesterday, you got to follow him on Twitter at PFF_Brad. There was one number that jumped out at me yesterday that I couldn't believe when I saw your extended tweet on the moves that the general managers around the league have made, either up or down during an NFL draft. I have my general opinions about general managers and the way they handle their business. I have not done the research the way you did, so I thank you for doing that research. The fact that Jerry Jones is not that big a mover and a shaker. I understand when Jimmy was running the show way back when, he was just that shoot. He was the guy who generated the draft value chart. But Jerry has been the guy in charge as owner/general manager for a while. I just thought he was more of a wheeler dealer than he actually is. I guess he's a bigger talker, and that's why I thought he was a bigger wheeler dealer. But your numbers say the Cowboys do not move around all that much. They usually sit and take the guy that comes to them in their spot, huh?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I was a little bit caught off guard by that running through the numbers. Yeah, I thought there would be more movers and shakers, but they do tend to just stand pat. I will say though, they draft very well. They do a good job in the draft. So maybe they're just confident that where they are, that they're going to land a guy they like. But yes, I agree with you there. And also, I think even more surprising, I don't know if people realize they don't really spend that much money either. They spend some of the least in the entire league on outside free agents. So non-Cowboys players, and then they do pay their guys, if they earn it. But yeah, they really are. He is kind of. He a lot of bark and I guess less bite in some regards.
Yeah, I think where Jerry, I think where that perception comes from, he tends to get bigger names at the end of their careers. I think he likes that type of player. He tried to get Everson Griffin last year. It didn't work out. At the end, a really good, really productive player. They signed him to 1 year. Aldon Smith is coming back, big names. Always loves the big names, but that's just, I wanted to talk to you, Brad, about GMs as a whole. I agree with you. Howie gets tremendous value. What are the other GMs that you found kind of really understand the board and do a good job getting value, whether they're going up or going down?
Yeah, so no surprise here, but obviously the Patriots and Bill Belichick, they have also had a bit of a string of poor drafting the last 4 or 5 years. Granted, they're picking 30th, pretty much every year in those drafts. They lost the first, obviously for Spygate, stuff like that. But they do generate really good value in moving down. And a thing that the Patriots, the Vikings, and the Seahawks and the Eagles do very well that we also really like is acquiring future draft capital. So this again goes back to the charts as well. And I have this on record from several clubs again, is that a future pick is essentially treated as, if you're getting a future first, you value it in the trade chart as a mid-second rounder. and if you're getting a future second as a mid-third, and so on and so forth. So basically, pick 48, 49 for a first, 80, 81 for a second, and so on and so forth. So while I understand that, putting a time value on a draft pick, it can make sense. You can argue it makes sense. I argue it doesn't at all because, you're always going to need draft picks. You're always going to need to add talent to your roster. Frankly, why teams do it is because some GMs, the average GM probably lasts, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think smart GMs, like a Belichick, like a Rick Spielman in Minnesota, John Schneider in Seattle, and again, obviously Howie's been there forever, different titles, but been there a long time. They recognize that, look, like there's no reason to treat these picks as though there's a time value. If a team's going to intentionally dock, a future pick by a round, we'll take that all day long. And I think those teams do a very good job in that regard.
I think your point is very well taken because there are more than a handful of GMs every year who believe if I don't get the team better this upcoming year, I'm not going to be around to take that extra draft pick in the future that's going to be mine. The guys who, and Howie Roseman's one of them, who feel very confident in their position that they're going to be here for future drafts, can take the non-reduction when analyzing what the value is for future draft picks. And let me add this to the mix, see if you feel the same. I think that future draft picks are now in this particular draft that go forward to next year devalued even less because, number one, the cap is going to come back up. How much? We don't know for sure yet, but it's not going to have the massive reduction that it did this past year. It'll either be flat or slightly increased. At some point, it'll take a major jump up when gates are open and they're packed houses and the like, and that new TV money kicks in. So you're going to be that's going to make everything more valuable. And number two, we're not going to have any holdouts this year. There are a bunch of players that are in this draft, some of which are going to go very high, who did not play in 2020. And you have to project what they're going to be able to do on the next level. Teams are going to feel more comfortable in the draft just overall next year if there is football across the board, all teams, all games, all year, that much more tape that you can look at. I got to believe it gives you a level of comfort to know I've got a pick in a year where I can really sink my teeth into draft evaluations, tapes on players. I don't think you need to take a reduction in all on future draft picks because of that.
I agree 100%. And also, not even just game tape, but also no combine. And I know folks get caught up in the testing numbers, but honestly, the combine is more about interviewing these players in person, getting them on the whiteboard to test their knowledge of football. And medical, evaluations is frankly what the teams actually care about at the combine. Of course, the testing matters a little bit, but so that as well did not happen this year. So I agree. No, I think teams are more confident in next year and the year after and on and on. I mean, also I saw yesterday a couple places say, teams are telling media this is the worst draft class they've seen in a long time at certain positions, but also just overall. They said it's one of the least deep draft classes in their careers. Some said ever. So yeah, I agree with you that maybe they shouldn't have as much of a devaluation. But I still think end of the day that these smart GMs are going to kind of be able to get it regardless, because like you said, ultimately all it takes is that desperate GM that thinks his job is on the line or his job is on the line, and they'll do whatever it takes.
All right, last one from me, Brad, and you can read Brad at Pro Football Focus. Follow him on Twitter. You see his Twitter handle right there at PFF_Brad. You're in one of those cities, as you mentioned, Chicago. Ryan Pace. A lot of people think he is GMing for his job. Matt Nagy as well. Have you? It's tough because you don't really know the guys who really are on the last leg. Have you kind of noticed differences in behavior when guys are on the hot seat, so to speak?
You do. It's a good question. You do. You can't always know for sure, but an example I've said a lot last year, and obviously, a bit, hindsight where it proved to be true, but I felt like Thomas Dimitroff of the Falcons was not behaving as rationally and as normally as he had before. Trading a second-round pick for tight end Hayden Hurst just didn't seem like good value. Didn't make a ton of sense. and a couple other moves. They signed Dante Fowler to a deal that I don't think, other teams are probably going to offer him. He did have a good year in LA, but, up to that point in his career had not been great. Coming off the edge, he was obviously terrible last year. He's already taken a pay cut since. And it comes out, mid-season that basically Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, told him, look, you make the playoffs this year, you're done. Kind of gave him an ultimatum before the offseason began. So I think you can tell. I actually, speaking of Chicago, while Pace probably should be on the hottest, a very, very scorching seat, I frankly don't know that he is. I think he has the confidence and trust of ownership that he can maybe see this through. But I still think he's going to behave. I still think it would be, them trading up for a quarterback would not surprise me in the slightest. And that tends to buy you time. So maybe, it cools down the seat a bit because they say, okay, well, now we have to let this guy, see this prospect work out, stuff like that. Off the top of my, I guess I think there was a lot of turnover this offseason. So I don't know many other obvious hot seats at this point because there are a lot of new GMs in the league this year.
Brad, you're a perfect guy. Last one for me to get a perspective on something that John and I discussed earlier in the week. An ongoing issue in the National Football League is training camps or camps before training camps open up, voluntary working. And the NFLPA came out and influencing up teams for guys to take votes and say, we're not going to do voluntary workout, virtual only voluntary workouts. And to their credit, a bunch of players haven't shown up, but there are some teams that said we won't be showing up, and then they did show up. Some of those because they've got workout bonuses clauses in their contracts, and guys just don't want to give up money. The teams responded by saying, oh, by the way, if you've got a workout clause, we expect you to work out. Otherwise, we're not going to be obligated to pay you. John noted the other day that the league, the union will attempt to get the players when negotiating through their agents for future contracts to have less emphasis on workout bonus so they can continue to fight this fight to not work out during voluntary time periods. Flip-flop that. Will teams work that much harder now to put workout clauses into contracts just to pressure players to come in for quote-unquote voluntary workouts? How much is this going to be a push-pull thing between management and the players and their agents?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, yes. So I think, yes, I'm sure agents will try, and I'm sure teams will even stronger push to have those in there. I think an even bigger one is, and not every team does this, but a couple teams do, the Cowboys do it a lot, is actually salary de-escalators if you don't come in and work out. So you don't even earn a bonus for being there. You avoid having your salary drop by sometimes like $500,000 by not showing up. I think more teams will definitely emphasize putting those in there. And frankly, I think the big thing too is that, and it applies this offseason, but also going forward, is that all you really need to do is put that in there for 5 to 10 of your best players. If you're on the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers shows up for training camp, your ass better be there. Otherwise, you don't look good and your spot on the roster is at risk. So I think that's part of it too, is that you don't even need everybody to have it. You need a couple leaders on both sides of the ball, a couple of your high earners there. And if they're showing up, then you have no excuse. And your agent's going to tell you should go because your job is not guaranteed. So it's an impossible position. I feel for the union. It's a tough union to negotiate for and bargain for because there's just so much push and pull between themselves in that everyone's interests are different. But fringe roster guys can't not be there, and their agents are going to tell them that. So like you said, all these teams come out with these statements, and we've already seen a couple of reports that basically a lot of guys are still showing up because they don't have a choice.
Yeah,
understood. Brad, great stuff. I lied. I got one more question, real in-depth one. Where are you watching the draft?
It's a great question. I'll probably watch with friends in New York City. I live in New York now, but I'm always working it, and I'll be putting out analysis and trade analysis and stuff like that, which you can of course follow me at PFF_Brad for all that stuff.
He's a great follower on Twitter. You should do just that. We appreciate him hopping on live with us here today on Birds 365. Enjoy the draft, Brad.
You too.
Our pleasure. That is Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus here with us on Birds 365. All right, J-Mac and I will come back. He's got to do more work after he gets off the air here. I might take a nap. I might just record a Howie Roseman gathering
Yeah.
And I'll be able to pick McMullen's brain thereafter and see if anything went surprisingly different. John and I will talk about that. The Eagles media availability today leading up to the draft, more than a week away. We'll come back, talk about that next here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.